musos.
Okay.
And his north node was Sag in the third house. So it was brilliant, and it proved to be a long-standing idea.
Bringing an astrological lens to you there, Michael Smythe. But needless to say, whether you love the lava lamp or not, 60 years on, here we are, and most of us know what it is.
Yeah, and that's a good thing that they've got staying power, because they're actually not recyclable, or they can be a bit toxic to throw away. So having something that lasts a long time as a cultural icon makes it a bit more sustainable. The question is it really heirloom material?
Yeah.
The problem is that you can't say, oh, well, they do consume a lot of energy if you have them on all the time, and they have to be on to work.
I guess what
you can't put a LED lamp in, because it can't create the heat that's required.
So you were saying basically at the end of the day, keep it in the conversation Pahira, keep it in the air of Shagpile. Bye, Swan. There you go. 60 years of lava lamp. Kia ora, Michael. Leaving you with a bit of maiden for the maidenheads with us, of which there are quite a few, it seems, with us today. Connor English, Sarah Sparks. Great show, thank you. I'm Wallace Chapman. See you tomorrow, 3:45. Lisa Owen and Checkpoint is next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, Chris Hipkins lives another day as Labour leader, saying he's still got some fight in him. But former Minister and Senior MP Andrew Little is tapping out to make way for new talent and golf. Christchurch is up financial shit creek, according to the Mayor. Phil Major joins us to talk potential double-digit rate rises. Speaking of pooey water, sewage from a leaking Auckland pipe has finally been plugged, but a bunch of beaches are still no-go zones. It might not feel like it, but apparently we are winning in the war on inflation, and one airline's hefty responsibility: flying a sumo wrestling team. We'll have the details. You can watch us live on RNZ's website. RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Mārie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. Chris Hipkins has emerged from the first meeting with his caucus following Saturday's election defeat, still the leader of the Labour Party. Other post-election departures have begun, however, with former leader and cabinet minister Andrew Little quitting politics. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The meeting at Parliament ran for nearly 2 hours. Chris Hipkins said afterwards time was taken to farewell departing MPs and reflect on the implications of the result. He'll stay on as MP for Rimutaka for the whole term, but says any decisions about his leadership are for the caucus.
Still absolutely committed to making sure that we manage a smooth transition to a new government and a smooth transition into opposition.
Labour's rules require a vote to endorse the leadership within 3 months, which needs the support of just over 60% of MPs. Chris Hipkins says in the meantime he'll run the caretaker government in close consultation with incoming Prime Minister Chris Luxon.
An economist is optimistic the war on inflation is being won. While prices rose 1.8% in the 3 months to September, Stats NZ data shows annual inflation dropping to 5.6%. Kiwi Bank chief economist Jared Kerr says inflation is easing faster than the Reserve Bank predicted.
Inflation was running at 7.3% last year. Now it's dropped all the way to 5.6%, and we think it'll be, 4-point-something% at the end of this year. So we're moving in the right direction.
US President Joe Biden will travel to Israel tomorrow to show his support for the country in its war with Hamas. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Tel Aviv says the president will be briefed on Israel's war aims and strategy, as well as how it will seek to minimise civilian casualties.
President Biden will again make clear, as he's done unequivocally since Hamas's slaughter of more than 1,400 people, including at least 30 Americans, that Israel has the right and indeed the duty to defend its people from Hamas and other terrorists, and to prevent future attacks.
Mr Blinken says Israeli leaders have agreed to develop a plan to allow aid to reach civilians in Gaza. The former Minister Kitty Allen told RNZ staff at a farewell for presenter Marnie Dunlop that the journalist would come home from work feeling broken and battered. RNZ has released the full transcript of the speech Ms Allen gave at the March leaving function for Ms Dunlop, who was her fiancé at the time. Jemima Houston reports.
The Chief Ombudsman ordered RNZ to release Kitty Allen's full speech after receiving 3 complaints about the company's refusal to do so. The public broadcaster has complied, and a spokesperson says it will provide a copy of the transcript to any subsequent requests. RNZ had already published the former minister's comments about the company failing to retain Māori talent. Kitty Allen later made a public apology, saying her comments could have been interpreted as a minister telling RNZ how to manage its staff.
The Christchurch Mayor says the council is looking down the barrel of an 18% rates increase if it doesn't make some major cost savings. The City Council is working on its 10-year plan, and Mayor Phil Major says that figure isn't acceptable. And Auckland's Deputy Mayor says businesses have coped well with disruption while a bypass is built for a sewer. It's been 3 weeks since a waste and stormwater pipe burst in a central Parnell car park, and a 13-metre deep sinkhole then blocked the sewer. Desley Simpson says it's been hard on nearby businesses.
There are a lot of businesses in this part of St George's Bay Road. They've had to put up with disruption to traffic, customers, parking, etc. And it's been quite significant. And I've been really impressed how understanding they've all been.
An above-ground bypass pipe now redirects wastewater, but sewage will still overflow into the ocean when it rains. To sport, and the All Whites will ask plenty of questions of Australia's defence in tomorrow morning's international in London, says coach Darren Baisley. The match is being played at the home ground of English Premier League side Brentford. The teams will compete for the newly minted Ashes football trophy, with Australia favourites after winning 2 Trans-Tasman matches last year. Baisley says their desire to be more than just a possession-based side was evident during their recent 1-1 draw with the Democratic Republic of Congo.
We've started to become a little bit more varied in our play to threaten teams in behind. We're starting to move the ball side to side a little bit better. At some stage, all those moments that we have are going to come together, and we're going to score quite a few goals in a game.
Eddie Jones is adamant he's committed to coaching Australia for the long haul and stands by his ill-fated youth policy that saw the Wallabies crash to their earliest Rugby World Cup exit. In his first public appearance since returning to Australia, Jones said he hadn't spoken to anyone about replacing former All Black Jamie Joseph as Japan national coach and didn't know where reports that he had came from. And long-serving netball coach Robin Broughton will be remembered on Thursday night when the Silver Ferns host World Champions Australia in Invercargill. The Invercargill venue will be called Robin Broughton Stadium for the night in memory of Broughton, who died in September. Australia lead the 4-test Constellation Cup Series 2-0. That's the news.
Mr Luxon hasn't called, but New Zealand First is unlikely to be phased.
Winston's got the skin of a rhino and the memory of an elephant.
While Europe's Rugby World Cup fans lick their wounds.
On the black market, there's a lot of tickets. They won't stay 2 weeks to see New Zealand, South Africa or England play.
And croissants are a labour of love.
So we're fermenting about 24 hours our dough before we fold in 27 layers of butter.
Best served fresh. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Northland to Taumarunui, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Scattered showers, some heavy, with thunderstorms possible this afternoon and evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain spreading north to Gisborne City today, then turning to isolated showers tomorrow, possibly heavy. Taranaki to Manawatu, including Taihape, periods of rain, possibly heavy and thundery, turning to isolated showers tomorrow. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Wairarapa, Marlborough and Nelson. Periods of rain, heavy at times, then becoming mainly fine tomorrow morning. Bulla and Westland, scattered rain north of Greymouth, clearing this evening or tonight, otherwise fine weather. For Canterbury, showers clearing this evening, then cloud clearing and becoming fine tomorrow morning. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, isolated showers clearing to fine this afternoon. However, showers returning to Fiordland and southern Southland tomorrow. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, partly cloudy with a few showers today. It is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi Evie, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Chris Hipkins remains the leader of the Labour Party for now, declaring he's still got a bit of fight in him after a caucus debrief to dissect its election night disaster. His longer-term future, though, remains uncertain, with the caucus putting off a vote on the leadership at least until after the final count early next month. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The red tide receding, the Labour team old and new meeting this morning to farewell the departing. And boy, are there a lot of them.
A little bit sad, a bit reflective about how it's been.
It's really sad to be farewelling so many wonderful friends and colleagues.
Eventually people won't change, and that's what happened.
A caucus diminished, a team of more than 60 reduced to just 34. The feeling clearly still raw, as captured here by Newshub when Damien O'Connor slipped out for a toilet break mid-meeting.
Is Chris Hipkins still the leader of the Labour Party?
The MP, freshly ejected from the West Coast, not keen on questions. Others in the caucus still seem in denial. Helen White is barely clinging on to Labour's traditional stronghold of Mount Albert, Jacinda Ardern's old seat, with a slim majority of just 100 votes.
We've done really, really well. We've punched above our weight.
But Labour did not do really, really well. It did really, really poorly. And it leaves those remaining with some tough questions to reckon with. For one, should the old hands make way for new or stick around to offer experience? Grant Robertson says he will stay for now.
My commitment is to be here to get us into shipshape for opposition, and then I'll keep assessing things from there.
A different approach from Andrew Little, the party's former leader. He's calling time on politics, giving up his seat for another candidate on the list to take.
I am not the face of the 7th Labour government. The party now needs to think not just about what opposition looks like, but what the next government looks like, and identify the faces for that.
Not just the faces, but the head too, the critical question of leadership. Not since 1996 has a losing opposition leader stuck around to contest the next election. But Chris Hipkins says, for now at least, he's not going anywhere.
Right at the moment, the Labour Party needs some stability and some continuity as we transition out of government and into opposition. I didn't want to create a huge void, and also I want to take some time to reflect, and I want to take some time to reflect with the team on what the best way is forward for the Labour Party.
Under the party's rules, the caucus still needs to have a proper vote on the leadership within 3 months of the election, but that is a question for another day.
That's not even something that we're going to, to contemplate properly until we've got a final result from the election.
His caucus colleagues were publicly backing the man today.
I think he's got the goods, be it as Prime Minister or Leader of the Opposition, and if someone's good at something, regardless of what's happened, they're still good.
He put it all out there and he still has my support.
And yes, I totally back him. I think he's done a great job.
Chippy's a good person, he certainly has my support.
You've got a terrific leader, and I think he just needs an opportunity.
But Willie Jackson also betrayed a potential problem, revealing the phones have been running hot about the result and the leadership.
I think one or two people have aspirations.
Not exactly the words an existing leader wants to hear.
I've still got a bit of fight left in me.
Chris Hipkins will certainly need it. The challenge illustrated just 2 floors up as National's new enlarged caucus also gathered for the first time. Christopher Luxon hailing the party's result as one of New Zealand's great political comebacks. Better spirits certainly than their opponents in red, but National still has a task ahead too, and a tricky one. The task of forming government with ACT and potentially New Zealand First.
It is 11 minutes past 5. Kia amo tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National, and do let us know your thoughts on who you think should be the leader of the Labour Party, whether it be Chris Hipkins or someone else. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Christchurch residents could be facing a rates rise of up to 18%. Mayor Phil Major has said the City Council is, quote, in shit creek financially, and cuts are on the cards, something his residents don't want to hear.
What do you reckon about a potential 18% rates increase?
Wouldn't be good. 18% is a lot. Yeah, like how are people supposed to deal with that, you know? Because it is such a big impact on just the regular people.
I guess there's a financial responsibility to make sure that the council is viable, and they've got to work out managing their debt but fund the services that need to be funded. I wouldn't want to be in that position, but right now people can't handle extra costs being given onto them either, because it's a really difficult time.
I think it's very concerning, because I'm on my own in a house, and the rates are actually quite difficult to face as it is as a one person, in a property, and they've been substantially increased over the past year, so another increase is really going to affect people as well. And reducing the hours of libraries and anything to serve the community is going to be a detrimental effect on not just adults but children and people that can't afford access to computers. That's what the library provides for them, so it's actually quite sad if that's the case.
The full extent of the situation has been laid out for councillors at a closed-door briefing today, and Phil Major's clear the chopping block is being warmed up.
At Christchurch City Council, we have got some serious financial issues. I said that some of the language I used is the way I speak, and that's how it came out. But we have got some serious.
So what is it,
money.
Phil? What language did you use? How would you describe it? And Phil, speak.
No. I said that in the paper this morning. I don't need to say it again.
So you're up a certain creek, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we're up at creek, and we've got a lot of things ahead of us to sort out.
Okay, what is the size of the debt and the repayment as you see it?
The debt at the moment is $2 billion. So what I tried to do was get it down so Joe, average public person, could understand it. So I went to my bank manager and said, I want to borrow $2 billion and pay it back over 15 years. What are the repayments? And it came back at $15 million a month, and that's what I put out there, which turns out to be $340 a minute, which is very scary. And that's what I just want to crystallise in our people's head, how serious this is.
How did you get up that creek without a paddle, Phil?
We've got a lot of borrowings that we had from the earthquake. I'm not blaming the earthquake. We built a lot of things. We got a hell of a lot of money from the government after the earthquake, but we've got some borrowings that we still haven't managed to knock over.
What is the worst case scenario in terms of a rates rise?
At the moment, if we stay the course of what we're doing, we're looking down the barrel of 18%. But that is just a starting point, and it is definitely not acceptable.
18%.
18%, yep.
That's going to sound pretty scary to people.
Oh, absolutely. But we've got to look at everything or every way to save money. Now, I gave two examples the other day of operational costs, which I shouldn't have done because it hasn't helped the situation, but there's definitely no decisions have been made. This is a starting point. And as a group, we have to make a decision. So I'm just putting things out there for my councillors to...
Okay, so what things, examples, could be under consideration? I know these are decisions that haven't been made, but what should be on the list to look at, please? Libraries, should they be?
They may well be on the list going forward. We have got all sorts of things that we're looking at. There's roading, there's drainage, there's every part of council has come into us today to give us a heads up on where we can find some possible savings, because 18% is not going to cut it, certainly in my book.
So swimming pools, potentially you could close or shorten hours of those public services. Is that what you mean?
Everything is on the table. Everything is on the table.
Offloading assets, is that on the table?
We have got a lot of land assets which are absolutely surplus to requirements. That's information that we got today. So we're quietly working through a draft. We've done a dozen public meetings on the long-term plan already, but now we're getting into a draft because by February, we have to produce a draft, a long-term plan for public consultation.
When you talk about worst case scenario, I know, 18% rate rise, are you talking about for the 2024-25 year?
That is correct.
So just around the corner, really?
Yeah, everything's just around the corner, yep.
So are you going to put your hand out to the new government, see if they can help you?
Well, we haven't got a new government yet. We'll find out on the 3rd of November what's happening, and then it'll probably take a couple of weeks after that. But I'm certainly going up and going to talk to whoever's the new Minister of Local Government and people up there and see what I can do.
And what would you be saying to that new minister?
How can we work with you to get a better result for everybody?
And does that translate to where can you support us with some money?
Maybe, it's mainly to get some of our roading infrastructure across the threshold and just work with us, because we did very well after the earthquake. We've got a new motorway here and we've got a new motorway there, but then we're sort of other places have done a bit better than us. So I just want to go up there and fly Christchurch or Greater Christchurch's flag.
So Phil, port and airport on the chopping block potentially?
No, well, at the moment we're going through a strategic review of Christchurch City Holdings, and we haven't had that review. It's finished, but we haven't had that delivered to us yet, and it's up to them.
So you can't rule out?
Well, it's up to what the strategic review comes up with.
And that's Christchurch Mayor Phil Major. Let us know your thoughts on that one if you're in Christchurch. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Potentially up to 18% rates rise. They're going to try and trim. Any thoughts on where that money should come from and what should be sold? To the Middle East now, and an effort to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza has failed. The US had been trying to broker a deal to get the Rafah border crossing from Gaza into Egypt reopened so that aid trucks can get in and foreign citizens can get out. But the area around the crossing was hit by an Israeli airstrike and the border remains closed. 1 million Palestinians are now thought to have fled from the north of Gaza to the south and are in urgent need of help. The ABC's Lauren Day reports.
After 10 days of aerial bombardment, Gaza is almost unrecognisable, and ordinary items have been converted to house the extraordinary number of dead.
It's an ice cream truck, but you see what's inside? Small kids, got killed by Israeli airstrikes.
Mataz Aziza has been documenting the unfolding crisis and is one of hundreds of thousands of Gazans who've fled their homes after warnings from the Israeli military.
So we are now crossing the bridge, which is the point that Israeli military is marked as after it. When you cross it, it's like the safe area.
In the so-called safe area in the south, there are different threats. Food, water and fuel are running out, and with them, hope.
There's no future there. There's no future, believe me. This will never end. It's to the last day of Earth.
22-year-old Yara took only a handful of photos of her home before she was forced to flee. One is of the 2 stray cats that had made their home with Yara's family, curled up on their doorstep.
I took this picture feeling that they are saying goodbye to us and we are saying goodbye to them. And as you can see, there was plates where we put food for them, and we put food for the last time.
Even in the south of Gaza, there's a constant drone of aircraft overhead as Israeli strikes intensify.
Yesterday was October 15, my birthday. I turned 22. But it didn't feel like a birthday. And when my family was trying to make something for me to celebrate my birthday yesterday, they bombed somewhere near, and we lost 5 people of my relatives.
In a makeshift evacuation centre at a school, kids are throwing paper planes. It's a rare moment of joy in a week of horror. And with half the population under 19, it's the young who've suffered the most.
It is 21 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Incoming or departing MPs at Parliament today. If you're in Christchurch, potentially weighty rates rise on the cards. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time to go to the headlines now. Evie standing by, ko Evie anō tēnei.
Chris Hipkins remains Labour's leader for now and says he's still got a bit of fight in him. The party today held its first caucus meeting after Saturday's election loss to National, which saw a Labour team of more than 60 reduced to 34. Meanwhile, Labour Minister Andrew Little is retiring after 12 years in Parliament, clearing the way for another Labour MP's return. Pike River families have paid tribute, thanking Mr Little for his work getting the mine re-entered. At the order of the Chief Ombudsman, RNZ has released the full transcript of the speech former Minister Kitty Allen gave at presenter Marnie Dunlop's farewell gathering in March. Ms Allen had told RNZ staff that Ms Dunlop, her then partner, would come home from work feeling broken and battered. RNZ had already published Ms Allen's comments about the state broadcasters failing to hold on to Māori talent, for which she later apologised. Christchurch City Council Mayor Phil Major says it's up the creek financially and cuts are on the cards to avoid a rates rise of up to 18%. Mr Major told Checkpoint the council has a $2 billion debt and faces repayments of $15 million a month. And a US effort to broker a deal allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza has failed. Meanwhile, Iran has warned of possible preemptive action against Israel in the coming hours, ratcheting up fears of a possible escalation of the conflict between Israel and Hamas. President Biden will travel to Israel tomorrow to show his support. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, everything is running normally in all of the main centres except Auckland. There have been crashes or breakdowns on the southern, northern and northwestern motorways this afternoon, but they have all been cleared away, we are advised, before 5 o'clock, so hopefully you're not sitting in too much traffic. Our next traffic news and headlines are at 20 to 6.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Having overseen the Wallabies' worst ever Rugby World Cup campaign, coach Eddie Jones is adamant he's sticking around. Speculation was rife during Australia's short stay in the tournament that Jones was looking to move on from the Wallabies and return to the vacant Japan head coach position. Now Jones is urging Wallabies fans to wait 4 more years to see his plan come to fruition. And we're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. Okay, so he is back from France. What is Eddie Jones saying about the terrible World Cup campaign?
Firstly, he is still denying that he actually had any interview with the Japan Rugby Football Union. The timing of the Sydney Morning Herald article, which highlighted that there was this Zoom interview process that he had been through, meant that the Wallabies and Jones had to address questions about this a lot during the World Cup. And it was brought up by Australian commentators that maybe this off-field distraction was something that had meant that they were out of the World Cup earlier than they'd ever been before. This was something that was distracting the players because it was around, and as much as they tried to deny it and as much as he tried to deny it, it was still something hanging over this World Cup campaign. As messy as all of this has been, that Eddie Jones was back in Sydney today and he was saying that he still believes that he has the backing of Rugby Australia. They're going to review this World Cup campaign, which is pretty standard practice these days, but he's saying that the results were disappointing and everybody is gutted by it. And when he'd put together this squad, he'd left out some veteran players, which had sort of backfired. And some commentators out of Australia were saying when the inexperience showed during some of these big World Cup games that they had lost, that maybe he would be rethinking it. But Jones still believes he took the right squad to France.
I came into the Wallabies, short preparation time. I had to make a quick decision on what we do. I had a look at the resources we had, the players we had. I made a decision, we've got to go with youth. That's the best option for Australia. I made that decision and the results of the World Cup weren't how we hoped, but I still think I've made the right decision there.
He's pointing out that all of the experience that these players had at this failed World Cup should perhaps come back when Australia hosts the Rugby World Cup in 2027. He's saying watch what happens then, that these players will have had that experience, and he hopes that by that time as well, across the board, rugby in Australia will have improved.
Shall we move on to hockey? New Zealand Hockey are wanting investors to revamp the domestic competition.
Yes, Hockey New Zealand sent out expressions of interest today, seeking 4 franchises for a new Premier Hockey League. The Premier Hockey League first came into place in 2020 as a way to give top New Zealand players who couldn't get overseas with the COVID travel restrictions, Black Sticks players who would normally play in Europe or other overseas leagues. It was a domestic competition that gave them elite level competition at home, and that was something that is now looking to be revamped in 2024. They're looking to bring it into a franchise competition, something similar to what you would see in, say, Super Rugby. It would be 4 franchises, a men's and women's team for each franchise. It would be played over a 7-week round-robin home and away series. And it would be a competition that would be run parallel, so the men's and women's competition at the same time, which is a bit unique in New Zealand sport. They already have 1 franchise locked in, so they're looking for 3 more owners to come from a franchise representing north of the Bombays, the Central and Lower North Island, and the South Island. So there's some opportunities there if people are interested. But Hockey New Zealand CEO Anthony Crummy says the league will prioritise a fan-first approach, showcasing elite-level athletic and entertaining hockey, driving new investment into hockey and elevating our sport to new heights. So to see who takes that on, expressions of interest do close on the 1st of December. So it'll be interesting to see who's got some money or some thoughts to promote hockey in New Zealand.
Thanks, Felicity. That's Felicity Reid, our sports reporter there. We are winning the war on inflation. That's according to Kiwi Bank Chief Economist Jared Kerr. Following news, inflation has cooled to a 2-year low. It's eased to 5.6%. However, inflation for the quarter is up, driven by increases in petrol prices and some food items. Emma Stanford reports.
Inflation is coming down, at least on paper. But try telling these Aucklanders.
I think it's a lie, just because the prices are going up so fast that, we can hardly survive, actually.
Everything feels harder. Life feels harder. It feels expensive.
It feels like it's just increasing and going up all the time.
Inflation has fallen to its lowest level since December 2021. It's now at 5.6%, down from its lofty heights of more than 7% in June last year. Still way off the Reserve Bank's 1 to 3%. Food was the largest contributor to the annual inflation rate.
Of course they're getting more expensive because inflation always goes up, but they are not going up as much as they were.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. I think a lot of Aucklanders are just tired and anxious and a bit overwhelmed, to be honest, with everything on top of COVID. A lot of people struggling.
Staples such as milk, cheese, eggs, bread and cereals increased almost 12% in the year to September. Housing and household utilities was the second highest driver of inflation, followed by transport. Nicola Groden from Stats NZ says petrol prices increased 41 cents in the last 3 months.
What we saw at the start of the quarter in July was that 25 cents per litre tax relief came back on. So that's caused a really big part of that 41 cent increase. Because of that, we had our transport group as one of the main drivers for our quarterly increase in inflation.
But she says things are looking up.
In previous quarters, we had quite a high proportion of prices increasing or staying flat, but now that is starting to show a little bit of a drop-off and more prices are starting to fall.
Kiwi Bank Chief Economist Jared Kerr says inflation is easing faster than the Reserve Bank predicted.
Inflation was running at 7.3% last year. Now it's dropped all the way to 5.6%, and we think it'll be, 4-point-something% at the end of this year. So we're moving in the right direction.
Mr. Kerr says the drop significantly reduces the likelihood of any further interest rate hikes from the central bank. But out on the street, people are still struggling. Megan Danjan from Pakuranga Howick Budgeting Services says people are doing it really tough.
We are seeing some situations where people just cannot afford to run their cars, buy decent groceries. It's just decreasing their standard of living because things are so expensive. Some of the clients that we've seen, they are just eating toast for dinner because that's all they can afford.
And for those people, the numbers they want to see coming down are the ones on their supermarket bill.
It is 5:30. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news now. Ko takuhua NINA called Giles Beckford, who is joining us live from Wellington. Giles, let's talk about Synlait Milk and A2 Milk. Now, they are headed to a binding arbitration on a dispute. Tell us more.
They are indeed. Well, they used to be the best of buddies. Synlait Milk has the exclusive, or had the exclusive, right to manufacture infant formula for A2 Milk. Of course, remembering A2 Milk has a special type of infant formula. Big sellers in China, do well in Australia and New Zealand as well. A bit of a falling out. Earlier in the year, A2 Milk said the exclusive deal that you had to make our product, we're ripping it up. You haven't been performing well enough, and frankly, you can still make it for us, you just don't get to be at the head of the queue and get the preferential treatment. Well, they had a process. Good faith negotiations is what the process was called. They've obviously got nowhere with that, so they're now headed to the binding arbitration. There'll be an independent arbitrator, possibly an arbitration panel. We're not to know what's come of this, but A2 Milk owns about 20% of Synlait, so it doesn't want to see it go down at all because of this. But Synlait's got a lot of problems of its own, and about a third of its revenue comes from A2 Milk contracts. So they'll come to some deal, but the lawyers have now replaced the executives and the dairy people to settle this one.
And Giles, grumpy shareholders give Auckland airport executives a going over. What is making these shareholders grumpy?
Yes, look, annual company meetings, they're usually dreary affairs. It's like reading the will of the sort of financial sector wake for the year that's gone. And they're usually populated by grey-haired investors with times on their hands, a bee in their bonnet, and sausage rolls on their mind. So they're pretty dismal affairs, and it's very rare that shareholders engage with the executives who really hate these sort of meetings, but they've got to do them. Well, today at the Auckland Airport Fair, it was generally polite. It was well-mannered. It got through all the set pieces. Then it was question time, and all of a sudden something seized a few of the shareholders who were really grumpy about not the dividends that were being given, not the cost of the $3 billion terminal reconstruction or whatever. It was the hours they've had to wait at international part of the airport because of customs, couldn't find their bags, trying to get through biosecurity. And people were saying, it's disgusting. One of the descriptions was it was like a zoo and an absolute shambles. Well, of course, those sorts of things don't make the executives feel too good, so there are plenty of mea culpa maximas from the executives and from biosecurity. They point the fingers at the airlines saying, well, they're not coming in at the right time, so they all land together, and we're very sorry for this. It will be better at summertime. I thought the one suggestion from the shareholder that really tickled me was saying, well, couldn't Auckland Airport shareholders get preferential treatment by being treated like aircrew so that we could get through it? And I'm thinking, good luck on that one, buddy. But apparently that's a decision not for the airport company, but for somebody else. So once in a while, it happens at an annual meeting. You get a bit of biff. The next one to watch, I think, could be Fletcher Building in a couple of weeks. Not only did the directors run away from a proposed increase in their directors' fees, but of course they've got this whole leaky pipes thing that's now emerging in West Australia. I think we'll watch out for a little bit of venom there from a few shareholders as well.
You, Giles, would never be grumpy and grey-haired, would you?
I've never been known it. I mean, nobody's ever accused me of that, I have to say, Lisa.
All right, big spin around the markets then, Giles.
Share market, it was likely soggy for the day, mirroring the Wellington weather, but then it just perked up in the past half hour, 45 minutes. So it's closed up 29 points, about 0.25%, and just over the 11,300 level. Wholesale interest rates and the New Zealand dollar, they both eased a little bit after those inflation numbers came out. That's because financial markets are now, they're scaling back the chances of a further rate rise. And it's interesting to note only two of the big banks are still picking a rate rise in February this time, not in November. So Kiwi at just above 59 US cents, 92.9 Australian and 48.4 British pence.
Thank you. A very jolly Giles Beckford joining us there from Wellington with business news. A bypass pipe at the site of an Auckland sinkhole is finally operating, meaning hundreds of litres of wastewater will no longer be flowing into the harbour. But that's where the good news ends, because around 20 inner harbour beaches remain unsafe to swim in. Our reporter Lucy Sear and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
It's been 3 weeks since wastewater started pumping into the harbour. A sinkhole opened up at this site in Parnell, and a 100-year-old main sewer line underneath was blocked.
Today marks a milestone, a significant milestone in the progression of the repair of the damage to the Ōrākei main sewer and the cessation of these dry weather overflows.
Watercare's Chief Operating Officer Mark Bourne marking the completion of what he says is New Zealand's largest emergency bypass operation. But Mr Bourne says it will take a few days to begin to see the reduction of the wastewater overflows into the harbour.
At this point, there is a large amount of sewage that's built up behind the blockage, so it will take some days to draw that down. Once that's drawn down, that's when we'll see the overflows reducing.
Auckland Council's Healthy Waters is continuing to monitor water quality across 40 beaches, and about 20 are still marked as unsafe to swim in by SafeSwim. Mark Bourne says environmental monitoring of the harbour is also ongoing, including the sampling of oysters for pollutants. He says the gathering of kaimoana across those affected beaches are still off limits, and it's not clear yet when the harbour will return to its normal state.
Certainly the recommendation at this point is not to gather either shellfish or any form of fishing in Waitemata, particularly to respect the rahui that's been placed in a harbour by Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei.
Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson added that even after SafeSwim marks a beach as safe, people are advised not to eat seafood from those areas until 28 days later. Meanwhile, beachgoer Te Ngākau Rakete says officials have taken too long to stop the overflow.
It's a long time. You think about 3 weeks worth of sewage flowing into the ocean. That's horrendous, actually, when I think about it. I'm very shocked to hear that it's taken that long.
Here at Okahu Bay, there's no warning signage, which he says is disappointing.
A signage is, I think, something at a minimal that should be up and about so everyone's aware of the problem. So yeah, quite shocked that's not available to public.
Ōrākei local Carmen Goodwin says the Parnell sinkhole incident reflects a wider problem.
I think it's probably a systemic problem in making sure that infrastructure is upkept. I don't think it's a surprise, but it's a shock that it's come at such an extent.
Ms Goodwin says she'd like to see more communication from officials.
A little bit of transparency perhaps around what the issues are. It seems to be everything comes to a crisis and then action is taken at a very last minute sort of approach.
There are more than 30 sinkholes across Auckland, and other pipes had been broken in Parnell after the summer storms, including a wastewater pipe beneath the Parnell Rose Gardens. Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson says they're aware of the ageing network and the impact of the weather events.
The roses will bloom very, very well this year, I would think, in the Rose Festival as a result of the breakage there. I put a plug for the Rose Festival, which is on next month. But look, yes, they're very much aware that this is an older suburb and something that needs quite a look at.
The Parnell bypass will be in place for a few months as Watercare plans for the permanent fixing of the sewer line. An external review of the incident and how Watercare monitors the network is also underway.
And if you were listening to that story on radio, do check out the video version. It will be on our web page. Cricket will be included in the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics for the first time since 1900. Flag football, what is that? Squash, lacrosse and softball have also been accepted for Los Angeles. There is expected to be both a T20 men's and women's tournament. The BBC's Alex Capstick has this report from the cricketing heartland of Mumbai in India.
Well, this is the Maidan Oval in the centre of Mumbai, and normally this huge expanse of grass is covered with cricket matches. Today there aren't many, and it's because right now India are playing Pakistan in the World Cup, so everyone stayed at home to watch that. But the Mumbai Warriors have turned out to play the Battery 11 in a league match, and I'm here to find out what these cricketers make of the game's inclusion in the Olympics?
It's a great move. While coming through my childhood years, I always used to think all the sports are there, why not cricket?
My name is Swapnil.
Which team do you play for, Swapnil?
Mumbai Warriors.
How can you concentrate on this when India are playing Pakistan in the World Cup?
I know it's tough, that's why I got out actually.
Good answer. Tell me, cricket is going to be in the Olympics. What do you think of that?
We should have had a lot earlier, but yes, it's good that it's finally here. Cricket is in the Olympics.
Is it good for India and for the game? Why is that?
It's absolutely good for the game. It will give cricket a global presence. It already has, but then Olympic in itself has people coming from all over the world. This would help other countries to start playing cricket as well.
Only 6 teams will be in the competition, so not many. You expect India to be one of those teams?
Absolutely, it will be the first one.
Will it attract more Indians to watch the Olympic Games?
People will watch the Olympics, yes, they will. Indians will watch Olympics.
And we are keen for your feedback on that one. Should those sports be included or not? Cricket, really? Or should the Olympics only be for sports where it is the pinnacle event? And who decides what the pinnacle event is? A World Cup, is that a pinnacle event? I don't know. Evie's a bit disappointed about some exclusions. More on that later. Let us know on text 2101 or you can email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. I think there should be an eating contest for the underachievers, myself included. It is 18 minutes away from 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaro, do keep your feedback coming. 2101 on text, tweet us at checkpoint.rnz or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Here is Evie with the headlines. Anea Evie, mena pitpita kōrero.
Kiwibank's chief economist says the country is winning the war on inflation, which has eased to 5.6%, a 2-year low. Jared Kerr says inflation is easing faster than the Reserve Bank predicted. However, inflation for the quarter is up, driven by increases in petrol prices and some food items. 3 weeks since a waste and stormwater pipe burst in an Auckland car park, opening up a 13-metre deep sinkhole, a bypass pipe is now in place. It means hundreds of litres of sewage will no longer be flowing into the harbour unless there's heavy rain, but about 20 inner harbour beaches are unsafe for swimming. Police investigating a homicide in Miramar, Wellington, say they believe it was an isolated incident. Officers were called to a home on Totara Road yesterday. The name of the victim, a woman in her 60s, hasn't yet been released. A former Waikato share milker has been placed on 7 months home detention and banned from being in charge of animals for 2 years after breaking the tails of 84 cows. 48-year-old Mark Donald Richardson was sentenced in the Hamilton District Court today after admitting 2 charges. India's Supreme Court is set to rule on petitions seeking to legalise same-sex marriage. Petitioners say not being able to marry violates their constitutional rights and makes them second-class citizens. And hundreds of European Parliament members on a chartered train from Brussels to Strasbourg ended up at Disneyland Paris, thanks to a signalling error. One MP tweeted, "We are not a Mickey Mouse Parliament." Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, nothing like that here in New Zealand. Nothing new to report beyond those cleared breakdowns or crashes across the Auckland motorway network this afternoon. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
A diversion to Disneyland might be quite pleasant, Evie?
Take a bit longer than a few hours.
Exactly. All right, a Coromandel tour operator is hoping for a busy summer despite limited access to a key draw card, Cathedral Cove. DOC closed the walking track to the cove after extreme weather in January and February caused more serious rock falls in the area. Up to 180 landslides, historic and recent, have been identified along the 3.8 kilometres of tracks around the cove. DOC says debris up to the size of a kayak has also dropped off the actual arch each month for the last 3 months, causing an unacceptable risk, meaning foot access is out for the whole summer. Instead, it's encouraging tourists to visit via the sea. Cathedral Cove water taxi operator Hayden Smith joins us now. Kia ora, Hayden. Is this a good or a bad thing for your business?
Yeah, kia ora. The jury's out, to be honest. We're just taking it one day at a time. And yeah, I mean, honestly, I have no real idea of what the summer's going to hold. But I mean, yeah, let's just wait and see.
So what are visitors' reactions to the fact that they can only access the cove by boat?
I mean, Yeah, obviously they're a lot of them are disappointed that they can't do the walk into the iconic site, and yeah, I can understand that frustration for sure. But yeah, I mean, people are also just happy to see it one way or another. And at the moment, sure, it's by boat, and we can drop people there. And there's plenty of boat tours that do, it's an awesome opportunity to do a boat tour as well, and actually just see it from the water. Even though we land, there's still, lots of ways to see it.
So what are the rules, Hayden, at the moment if you take visitors there via boat? What can you do? How long can you be there?
Well, it's at this stage we're just offering a 1 hour stay at the cove, and they're to stay out of the archway and stay out of the 10 metres, at least 10 metres away from any of the rocks or cliffs. And I'm sure you're all over why that is, and that's just the increased chance of rockfall. And there definitely has been rockfalls. So I think I'm pretty kind of. I really enforce that people do need to observe those rules and make sure they stay 10 metres from the cove and from cliffs, because, the rules are there for a reason.
Are people being sensible?
Seem to be. For them, there's always going to be people, exceptions to the rule, and, there's going to be those types of events. But at this stage, people have been sensible, yeah.
Does there need to be a barrier around the cove itself, the archway?
I hope not. At this stage, I don't think so, because there's some signs, and there's been a bit in the media about whether they're, good or bad. But at the end of the day, the signs are relatively small, but they get the point across. And, irrespective of whatever language people speak or whatever part of the globe they're from, a giant red sign has got something to say. And at this stage, it's pretty clear you can't go on the archway. So, no, I think we don't need a barrier at this point.
Have you seen anyone accessing the cove any way other than by boat or kayak coming in from sea? Are people bushwhacking? Because that is the allegation. Some people say they're cutting new tracks.
No, I haven't. Not sure.
Yeah. So normally you get about 300,000 visitors a year. Normally, how much of a dent do you reckon this new system is going to make?
Oh, there's no doubt it's going to make a dent, and I feel for the businesses in the local area as a result of that. But yeah, it's honestly it's one step at a time at the moment. We haven't been able to land at Cathedral Cove for 8 months. We've only started landing there in the last week because the rahui's been lifted, which was there for a good reason, and the safety and the risks have been kind of analysed. And at this point, it's clear that there's rules in place, and they're there for a good reason. So the dent that it'll make, I honestly have no idea at this point.
Really appreciate your time. That is Hayden Smith. He is the water taxi operator for Cathedral Cove. It is 11 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Returning to Israel now, where the families of those being held hostage by Hamas say while they want their loved ones home, they don't want a full-scale war. An Israeli ground invasion is imminent, with truckloads of aid stalled at Egypt's border with Gaza. Humanitarian groups and residents are pleading for water, fuel and food, saying the territory is at near total collapse. CNN's Clarissa Ward reports from Tel Aviv.
For days, they have sat outside the military headquarters in Tel Aviv, holding vigil for their loved ones. Among many family members of those held in Gaza, there is anger at the Israeli government's handling of the crisis and growing cries to make a deal for the hostages' release. Shai and her family are looking for her sister, Lihi Albag, a 19-year-old soldier who disappeared at Nahal Oz kibbutz.
We don't know where she is, if she eats, sleep, where they keep her. We don't know anything.
So tell me, why are you here?
Because I want someone look at me. Look at all of us.
Earlier today, the government confirmed they believe another 50 hostages are being held in Gaza, bringing the total close to 200. Among them is 74-year-old Vivian Silver, a peace activist and Canadian citizen who lived in the Be'eri kibbutz. Be'eri was the site of some of the darkest bloodshed during the October 7th attack. Vivian's son, Jonathan, was on the phone with her throughout the morning as the horror unfolded.
I heard a lot of gunshots outside her window, and we decided to stop talking because she was hiding. But at some point she wrote me that they're inside their house.
Her house?
Yeah. And that was it. I wrote her, I'm with you. She said, I feel you, and that was the last message.
For 9 agonizing days, he has shuttled between optimism and despair as Israel's leaders steel its citizens for an invasion of Gaza.
When you look at more than 300,000 reservists being called up, huge amounts of weaponry and military personnel massing at the border, a lot of anticipation about a ground offensive, how does that make you feel?
It makes me anxious. I didn't want war before, and I don't want war now. I don't think we can cure dead babies with more dead babies.
Do you think in Israel that most people agree with you? Do you think people here want war?
Nobody wants war, but I think people are willing to accept war because you're hurt and you want to stop the pain. So you see the demon in front of you and you want to vanquish it. I don't think it's realistic. Whatever we do to Gaza now, it would come back.
A plea to break the endless cycle of violence and to prioritize rescuing the living over avenging the dead. But in this moment of raw anguish, it's the calls for invasion that are growing louder.
And back home, long-time Labour MP, former minister and leader of the party, Andrew Little, has called time on his political career, making way for a talent refresh after the weekend's drubbing. The former union leader was first elected in 2011 and has practically been the minister for everything, including health, justice, immigration, defence, the GCSB and Treaty of Waitangi negotiations. Following dismal poll results, Little also famously stood down as Labour leader just weeks before the 2017 election, making way for Jacinda Ardern. Today, he once again announced it's time for a fresh face.
I know it sounds cliched. It is a great privilege to serve, and particularly to serve as a cabinet minister. And that's, you do get to do some amazing things and meet amazing people. So it's sad to put that behind me. On the other hand, there is a sense of relief that goes with it. And I've got enough time in the rest of my life to go and do something else interesting before it all slows down. So that's where I'm at.
Did you know going into the election, if Labour wasn't in a position to form a government, that you would tap out?
I had thought carefully about what I should do and what is the right thing for me and the party and for the party. And I had, I'd long thought that if we aren't successful and it is time to kind of reshape and get ready for the 7th Labour government, that I wouldn't be a part of that and that I would make way for others to be part of that. We've had 2 incredible intakes in 2017 and 2020, really talented people. We'll lose a lot of them, but many of them will be, primed to come back. By stepping out of the way, I keep at least one more in the Caucus and they are part of the future face of a Labour government, then that's good and important, and that's what my motivation is.
Hey, it's not the first time you stood down to make way for fresh blood. You did it as leader, right, leading into the 2017 election. Do you think, and I'm not being funny when I ask you this, Andrew, do you think that is the best and biggest thing you have ever done for Labour in your career?
I guess I work on the basis that politics is a team sport. I think, as I said today, you need to have ego in politics, but you need to have humility too, and what goes with that is self-awareness. If it is the right thing to make way for others, then you do that. I think I do have enough self-awareness to know, when I can make my best contribution and when I need to make way for others. That's an important aspect of leadership too, and that's what I do.
When you talked to Chris Hipkins on Sunday, did you say anything to him? Did you say, along the lines of, I think you should stay on, stick it out? Did you say anything like that to him?
I was very supportive of him, and I worked reasonably closely with Chris this year and throughout the campaign, being there to support him.
Do you think he should stay, Andrew? Do you think he should stick around as leader?
Yes, I think he should. I think the caucus needs it and the party needs it. We still got to go through our own kind of review and reflection on the campaign, but I think he should stay there.
Are you worried as you leave about race relations in this country at all?
I saw what happened during the campaign and the sort of statements that were made and the pledges that have been made by not just the ACT Party, but New Zealand First and the National Party too. My biggest worry is that a lot of those statements were made in sheer and utter ignorance of the kind of recent history of the treaty and its place, particularly the legal jurisprudence, the legal recognition of the treaty, what it stands for. And frankly, by people who know better. I mean, Shane Jones knows better. I suspect Winston Peters probably does. David Seymour I couldn't vouch for because I don't think he cares much. In spite of the ACT Party saying they care about the rule of law, I don't think they actually do. The National Party knows better as well. The problem is I don't see in the National Party a Sir Doug Graham or a Chris Finlayson who can pick up that area and be responsible and forging ahead as indeed Doug Graham and Chris Finlayson both did. That's my worry.
Politics looks brutal. Is it worth it?
Yes, it is. It is because, and again, it sounds cliched, but it is a privilege to serve. It's a privilege to be in Parliament. It's a privilege to be a minister in cabinet. You do get to do extraordinary things, working with officials and others and stakeholders and all the rest of it. And done well, you get things done, and you can make change. Some of it's small, some of it's incremental, some of it sows a seed for something that could be really special later on. But you get to do that and be part of that. But politics is dynamic as well, and there should be change in politics. Political parties need to refresh and regenerate as well. And my stepping down is about saying that it is important for the Labour Party to refresh and regenerate, and that's part of what I'm doing.
Who is the freshie to watch then from Labour?
Oh, I don't know. We've got, I think, two amazing two new MPs, Ruben from Christchurch and Koshla from Ikaroa-Rāwhiti. I think that will be outstanding. But there's you put me on the spot, so I'm terrified if I don't mention someone's name, I'll be called out. But we've got, I just think, and I've long thought actually, and I've sat around those selection tables in the party before. We do have a depth of talent, and I'm very confident about our future.
What's your new hobby going to be? Because I think you're going to need one, aren't you?
Yeah, I have tried. I've tried as minister to get out on my mountain bike as much as I can. I haven't more recently, so definitely keen to get out on the mountain bike. I literally have not picked up my golf clubs for about 4 years, so definitely keen to resume that. And then I'm sure it'll be tasks around the home and in the garden and those sorts of things as well.
And that's departing MP Andrew Little. He's going back to practising law. He said he's waiting for his practising certificate to do that. Some of your feedback on the Labour leadership. Angela says, don't ditch Chris. Another person says Grant Robinson should be the leader of the National Party, but others think he's got a bit of the terrier in him. We need a quick-witted terrier. I think he'll be a great opposition leader, and he's a real person, says this person.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Tēnā tātou, good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. Chris Hipkins is staying on as Labour leader for now, but says the party caucus will have the final say on that. Labour's first post-election meeting at Parliament ran for nearly 2 hours. Chris Hipkins says time was taken to farewell departing MPs and reflect on the implications of Saturday's defeat. He'll stay on as MP for Remutaka for the whole term, but the caucus will decide if he remains leader.
I'm still absolutely committed to making sure that we manage a smooth transition to a new government and a smooth transition into opposition.
Labour's rules require a vote to endorse the leadership within 3 months, which needs the support of just over 60% of MPs. Chris Hipkins says he'll run the caretaker government in close consultation with incoming Prime Minister Chris Luxon. Senior Labour MP Andrew Little, who first entered Parliament in 2011, is retiring from politics and his place will be taken by a list candidate. Mr Little first entered Parliament in 2011 and led the party from 2014 to 2017, but stood down just before the election in the face of poor personal polling. Jacinda Ardern took over the leadership. He said with Labour going into opposition, it was important to give the next Labour government every opportunity to hone their skills and cement a strong team. Shannon Halbert is next on the list. The UN Security Council has rejected Russia's Gaza resolution that calls for a humanitarian ceasefire as the situation there worsens. More than 4,000 people have been killed on both sides since Hamas attacked Israel and Israel retaliated. The US Ambassador, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, says the UN should take action, but says Russia's resolution was outrageous, hypocritical and indefensible.
Russia's resolution, put forward without any consultations, make no mention of Hamas. None. By failing to condemn Hamas, Russia is giving cover to a terrorist group that brutalizes innocent civilians.
The police in Wellington say they're following positive leads after the death of a woman in the suburb of Miramar. A homicide investigation was begun after the woman, who was in her 60s, was found dead in her Totara Road home yesterday. Her body was discovered by a friend who was concerned for her safety. Police would like to hear from anyone in the area who may have seen or heard anything suspicious or concerning between early Friday morning and early Sunday. They say they believe the homicide to be an isolated incident and there is no risk to the public. They haven't yet released the woman's name and say the scene examination will continue for a couple of days. The Christchurch Mayor says the council is looking down the barrel of an 18% rates increase if it doesn't make some major cost savings. The City Council is working on its 10-year plan and Mayor Phil Major says the plan has started out with a proposed 18% rates increase. He told Checkpoint that figure isn't acceptable, so they need to look at all aspects of the council to see where savings can be made.
We have got all sorts of things that we're looking at. There's roading, there's drainage, there's every part of council has come into us today to give us a start, a heads up on where we can find some possible savings, because 18% is not going to cut it, certainly in my book.
Phil Major says strategic reviews are also underway on council assets such as the port and airport. A Watercare executive has described seeing a sinkhole in Auckland's Parnell open up beneath his feet the day before a main sewer collapsed. It's been 3 weeks since a waste and stormwater pipe burst in a central Parnell car park under a 13-metre deep sinkhole. An above-ground bypass pipe now redirects wastewater, but remaining sewage is still flowing into the ocean. Chief Operations Officer Mark Bourne has described seeing the sinkhole for the first time.
I was standing over here, just behind where we're standing at the moment, at the sinkhole site, and I saw quite literally the ground opening up beneath my feet. At that point, the Ōrākei main sewer was flowing, there was no blockage, and therefore there were no overflows into the environment.
Mark Bourne says the bypass means sewage will still overflow into the ocean when it rains. Police are blaming gangs for a spate of shootings in the Bay of Plenty town of Opotiki, where 3 houses and a vehicle were targeted. They say on Sunday, a man with a gun threatened the occupants of a house. Later that night, someone shot at and stole a vehicle. The next morning, shots were fired at another house and a 29-year-old man has been arrested. Police say this morning 2 other houses were shot at. No one's been injured. But Senior Sergeant Richard Miller says the behaviour is incredibly dangerous and it's a miracle no one has been seriously injured or killed. He says it involves gang members targeting each other and he's asking anyone with information to get in touch. Police in Auckland have responded to an assault at a bus stop that sent nearby Papatoetoe Central School into lockdown. Officers were called to Great South Road in Papatoetoe around 2:45 this afternoon. Police say those responsible for the assault fled before they arrived and the victim was taken to hospital for a checkup. And the trial of 19 people charged with the deaths of dozens of migrants suffocated in a refrigerated container is set to get underway in Paris overnight. 39 Vietnamese migrants, 2 just 15 years old, died 4 years ago. Their bodies were discovered inside the sealed unit at a port near London in October 2019. They'd travelled in the lorry from northern France to Belgium before crossing the Channel to Britain. 2 ringleaders of the operation, one Romanian and one British, have been convicted in British courts and sentenced to 27 and 20 years in prison respectively. That's the news.
I'm Catherine Ryan. On 9 to noon tomorrow, Courtney Place bar owners say they're facing unreasonable delays for liquor licences. The Mayor responds. Can sunlight protect against depression and anxiety, and how much do we need? Guy Cotter on his life spent climbing the world's biggest mountains. We play some music that's been beamed from space, and a guide for apiarists on how to spot and deal with honeybee pests and diseases. With me on 9 to noon on RNZ National.
You are back on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. From Northland to Taumarunui, also for Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Scattered showers, some heavy with thunderstorms possible this afternoon and evening. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain spreading north to Gisborne City today, then turning to isolated showers tomorrow, possibly heavy. Taranaki to Manawatu, including Taihape, periods of rain, possibly heavy and thundery, turning to isolated showers tomorrow. Horowhenua to Wellington. Also, Wairarapa, Marlborough and Nelson. Periods of rain, heavy at times, then becoming mainly fine tomorrow morning. Bulla and Westland. Scattered rain north of Greymouth, clearing this evening or tonight. Otherwise, fine weather. Canterbury. Showers clearing this evening, then cloud clearing and becoming fine tomorrow morning. Otago, Southland and Fiordland. Isolated showers clearing to fine this afternoon. However, showers returning to Fiordland and southern Southland tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, partly cloudy with a few showers today. It is coming up to 8 minutes past 6. News headlines are at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Auckland Light Rail is one of many Labour Party projects on the chopping block under the incoming national government. The party has promised to scrap plans for the city to airport link within its first 100 days in office. So is this the full stop for any future light rail developments in Auckland? Tom Taylor reports.
Take a look at the official website of Auckland's light rail and you wouldn't be blamed for assuming that it's progressing full steam ahead. Rain cannot dampen Auckland Light Rail's phenomenal pace. Auckland Light Rail shifts up a gear. Headlines on their news section suggesting a project that's well underway. The reality is, not a spade has been lifted outside of preliminary assessments. People who live near the proposed tramlines are still unclear what the plan is.
As of now, I don't really have an opinion on it.
And maybe just increase the people to come in our restaurant, I think, yeah.
It's been too long before it ever bloody, ever started, and I can't see any need for it, really.
More than $66 million have already been spent on consultants and contractors for the project promised by Jacinda Ardern ahead of Labour's 2017 election victory. Even if it were to go ahead, it remains unclear whether the trams would travel along Sandringham or Dominion Road, and how much would be tunnelled or on the surface. Most of the businesses Checkpoint visited along these potential routes hadn't even heard of the project, and chairperson of the Sandringham Business Association, Chithin Chittibommer, says community consultation left more questions than answers.
Okay, so you want to do this. Why would you want to do this? We'll come back to you. And that come back to you is a very popular answer in this whole Auckland light rail thing.
Mr Chittibommer says there was never any clarity on how businesses would be supported through the disruption. And he says for businesses to benefit in the long term, there'd need to be a big boost in housing, which would bring its own set of challenges.
It's going to be more infrastructure in a very small footprint. And how is that going to help businesses? I mean, it would take another 50 years for the vision to come through, which is you need to have high-rise buildings and so on and so forth. And then we put another question across, which is Sandringham and Dominion Road, they have heritage buildings that are listed, and we don't want to be breaking down that old architecture. We would like to preserve it as much as we possibly can.
Editor of the Greater Auckland blog, Matt Lowry, says the plan for light rail has changed so much over the years, it's been hard for people to get behind.
There's very little support for
for the current proposal in the community, particularly when you consider the cost of it, and it's not surprising that National would cancel that.
Treasury has estimated that the light rail project could cost anywhere up to $29 billion.
One of the arguments that the people behind light rail used for why they needed to have a tunnel is that they needed all this extra capacity for the future. What they never considered is, for that same price, we could build 3 lines in Auckland and we would have 3 times the benefit, or even more so, because we've got an actual network we're building, we've got more capacity overall, and we've got more people covered because it's covering a wider area.
Despite his concerns with the project as it stands, Mr Lowry says he'd like to see light rail go ahead in some form. But given its management under Labour, he says it's unlikely to be something any government promises in the near future.
The concern I have is that because that project has been managed so poorly, it destroys the idea of anyone proposing light rail for a long time, when it is a solution, one of the solutions that we need.
Auckland Light Rail Chief Executive Tommy Parker says the project team is continuing conversations with stakeholders and elected officials across the political spectrum. He says they're ready to brief the incoming Transport Minister when required.
New research has found significant gaps in the way domestic violence victims are checked for brain injuries. A study of over 600 incidents of domestic violence that presented to Wellington Hospital found that less than 1% of victims were checked for a brain injury, despite many reporting being choked or knocked out. It's part of a growing body of research into the number of people living with undiagnosed brain injuries in this country. And a warning, Luca Foreman's story contains some distressing descriptions of domestic violence.
For T. Whiting, violence was always a part of her life. She was abused by her mother as a kid and later by romantic partners. Ms. Whiting says the impacts that the abuse had on her brain made it hard for her to get help.
Even when I was seen by the doctor the following day, I had difficulties trying to explain why I was there.
The effects included disorientation, headaches, and a loss of balance.
You just feel like your head is absolutely pounding, and it can be like that for a long time after the hiding.
And she still lives with some of the lingering effects, years and years after the violence occurred.
Spatial disorientation, so I'm very easily turned about. I get very easily lost in a building. If you ask me where North is today while I'm sitting inside, I haven't got a clue.
Rachel Kane works for domestic violence help agency Shine. She says New Zealand has a long history of minimising family violence.
We don't want to believe that our next door neighbour who just loses it sometimes is actually causing repeated brain injuries to his wife, his partner. Because of that minimising, we haven't set up our system to adequately respond.
And she says domestic violence victims are often judged for the changes in behaviour which are caused by brain injuries.
I've worked with a client who was strangled pretty regularly, and she would slur her words for a couple of days afterwards. And people regularly thought that she was on drugs, and that really impacted any support that she could have got.
Alice Theodem is the co-author of a study in the Journal of Family Violence, which has found less than 1% of family violence victims who presented to Wellington Hospital were screened for a brain injury. Ms. Theodem wants this to change.
I really think the study highlights the need for routine medical assessments for possible brain injuries when people present after intimate partner violence.
Te Whatu Order spokesperson Deborah Woodley says its guidelines suggest assessments for brain injuries may need to be offered to domestic violence victims. She says there isn't a simple test for brain injuries, but rather a complex assessment of brain function. Ms. Woodley says Te Whatu Order's guidelines on domestic violence are regularly reviewed to be in line with best practice overseas. Alice Theodem says some health professionals are unsure how to deal with brain injuries and don't know what support is available.
There's definitely a need for more training, both for our medical professionals, but also for the allied health professionals like our social workers who are supporting people in those contexts.
T. Whiting now runs workshops to help others understand the effects of domestic violence under the name Magenta Blue. She says her life these days is amazing, a far cry from the violence she once experienced.
I have a wonderful family. Nothing's held me back. There has been difficulties over the years, but I do consider myself to be very, very fortunate, and I know that I am one of the fortunate ones.
It is 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. There were hopes today a temporary ceasefire would allow the only border crossing between Gaza and Egypt to open, enabling foreign nationals to leave and humanitarian aid to enter. But so far that has not happened. 1 million Palestinians are now thought to have fled from the north of Gaza to the south and are in urgent need of help. The BBC's John Donaldson reports.
Amid the destruction in southern Gaza, the homeless and the hungry, in their hundreds of thousands, are trying to survive. We have nothing that we need to live, says one man who's fled from the north. We're living in a dump, and if we move, we will die. Workers are shifting huge piles of rotting rubbish, and with too few toilets, there are fears about the spread of disease. There's food, but not enough. In Khan Yunis, Amir is stirring huge pots of soup and rice by the roadside. Once a town of 400,000, suddenly they're having to provide for more than 1 million. All this will feed less than 2,000 people, says Amir. It's just a fraction of those in need. There are long queues to get bread, but it's being rationed. We've been waiting here since 6 in the morning, one man tells us, just to get food to feed the kids. We left our homes in the north because we thought there would be aid, but where is it, he goes on. Give us electricity, give us water. And all the while the hospitals in the south, like in the rest of Gaza, are overwhelmed with patients from the old to the very young.
How many days? 7 days? 10 days?
In Rafah, a doctor holds a tiny baby in his arms. Hua al-Bach was born amid the chaos less than a week ago.
While most attention remains on the Israeli military offensive in Gaza in the aftermath of the Hamas attack, there has been a spike in violence in other major occupied Palestinian territory, the West Bank. The United Nations says the week following the Hamas massacres was the deadliest on the West Bank in almost 2 decades. 6 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli security forces or by Israeli settlers since October the 7th. The BBC's Tim Franks has more.
It's just a short drive from Jerusalem to Ramallah. Well, I say a short drive. It's been longer today because the main checkpoint going into Ramallah has been closed. But now that we're here, well, I have to say I've never seen it so empty. Shops, restaurants, offices, so many of them shuttered. The market, though, well, this is the usual riot of sounds and smells and colours, but there are fewer customers. Prices have gone up, and when people have come here, they've stockpiled or at least tried to.
الأوضاع مش مليحة عندنا من مرة. بعدين السوق عندنا غالي، الأسعار غالية كتير.
The situation is very bad. Here in the West Bank, prices are very high. The whole situation, in Palestine, including, the West Bank, Jerusalem and Gaza is horrible. As you know, it's war, so we're living under war.
You say it's war, but it's war in Gaza. It's not war here in the West Bank, or is that how you feel?
احنا الحرب عندنا في كل المناطق عندنا حرب وعندنا هنا كم شهداء واعتقالات.
It's war in Gaza, but here in the West Bank we have arrests, people being detained, we have martyrs. Yes, indeed, Gaza is worse, but here the situation is continuous as well, so war is everywhere.
Sitting on a broken chair close by is Ashraf. He's a vegetable seller. He gets his produce from the north of the West Bank, up near Jenin.
نعم فيش ناس مش زي دائما أقل من العادي. بسبب الحرب.
So it's war and business is not as usual. Also it's people who have money had spent them over the past week because it's a war situation, so they bought everything. So now the market is kind of not so busy.
And has it been more difficult to get your produce because of all the closures there have been, all the problems on the roads?
نعم يعني بتنزل
You start the engine of your car, at the same time you have your coffin on your shoulder, because any time, any Israeli terrorist settler would shoot you.
To Illinois now, where a 71-year-old landlord has appeared in court after a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy was stabbed to death. Police say the boy and his mother, who rented a room from the man, were allegedly attacked because they are Muslim. And as CNN's Whitney Wild reports, the attack is now being investigated as a hate crime.
Allahu Akbar.
6-year-old Wadia Al-Fayoum, a Palestinian-American, laid to rest today.
He's a very kind kid. He likes to jump up and down. When he was stabbed, he was last words to his mom. Mom, I'm fine. You know what? He is fine. He's in a better place.
The boy died after he and his mother, Hanan Shaheen, were allegedly stabbed Saturday in the room they rented from 71-year-old Joseph Zuba, just outside Chicago.
Their landlord, in an act of hate, shouted the threats and unleashed violence.
The landlord appearing in court today, while the boy's mother remains hospitalized, recovering from more than a dozen stab wounds. Zuba allegedly entered the room he rented to Shaheen and her son Saturday morning, stabbing the 6-year-old 26 times.
The female's claiming that the landlord has the child in another room and apparently is either stabbing or has stabbed the child.
Authorities have now opened a federal hate crimes investigation. The local sheriff saying in a statement, both victims in this brutal attack were targeted by the suspect due to them being Muslim and the ongoing Middle Eastern conflict involving Hamas and the Israelis. Outrage erupting over the brutal crime, illustrating why federal officials are worried about growing threats.
He paid the price for the atmosphere of hate.
Zuba now facing murder, attempted murder, and hate crime charges.
That report from CNN's Whitney Wild. Russian President Vladimir Putin has arrived in Beijing for talks with his Chinese counterpart as the two countries try to forge an alliance against the rest. With the Kremlin ever more isolated on the world stage, the Chinese government has refused to criticise its invasion of Ukraine, saying it will boost trade relations with Russia. The BBC's Stephen McDonnell travelled to the border region in northeastern China.
Over the past 100 years, China and Russia have been close allies and also bitter enemies. But in recent years, Beijing and Moscow have found themselves being frozen out on the world stage. So they've turned to one another for support and in an attempt to build something of an alliance against the West. To do this, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping have declared to their people that their countries now have a so-called no-limits partnership. So if this partnership is real, you'd expect to notice it having an impact in northeastern China's Heilongjiang province, which borders Russia, and where some places have been under both Chinese and Russian control at different points. Walking around the square next to the beautiful old St. Sophia Orthodox Cathedral, you do get a feeling for Harbin's Russian past. The nearby souvenir shop has Russian writing on it, and inside there are dolls and other nostalgic gifts reflecting Russian culture. But what's missing here today is Russian people, and it's hard to believe that they once dominated this city. All of those families and even all of their descendants have now gone, following the sweeping changes in the wake of World War II. But it did seem like a good place to ask people what they think about the current state of China-Russia relations.
Russia and China have a strong friendship.
Putin is a responsible leader, a man with a sense of justice.
Many local tourists have a good word to say about Russia's leader.
Putin is a man with iron fists. He's tough, and tough is good.
Leaving Harbin and heading right up to the border, you reach the point where Heilongjiang province is separated from Russia by a river. Here, according to China's state media, the small city of Hehe has experienced a significant recent increase in trade. But when we visit, this doesn't seem to be as healthy as has been claimed. Russia is so close you could swim across the water to the blocks of flats where Russian people are living, and so you'd think this would be the obvious place to build trade between the two countries.
Business isn't good. There aren't enough tourists.
A woman now selling her goods out of the back of a car after the shopping centre where she had a stall closed because of a lack of customers says trade has been flat for years.
After COVID, the borders haven't been open for long. There aren't enough Russians coming across.
Belgian authorities have raised the country's terror alert to its highest level after a fatal shooting. 2 Swedish people were killed in the attack in the capital, Brussels. Nearby authorities stopped an international soccer match, leaving 35,000 people holed up in a stadium. The ABC's Flint Duxfield reports.
The shooting took place around 5 kilometres from King Baudouin Stadium, where fans were in the middle of watching a UEFA Cup qualifier between Sweden and Belgium. 2 people are dead and another is wounded, with footage on social media showing a man wearing fluorescent clothing riding away from the scene on a motorbike. Eyewitness Bay Suleiman says he saw one person fall to the ground before he ran away to safety.
I'm still in shock because it's the first time I've seen a shooting like that, and the guy was screaming, and at one point I just heard gunshots and I was frozen in fact. I didn't know. I saw 2 people running. Cars, as soon as they got to the red light, they just accelerated. They didn't stop. It was just horrible actually.
The shooting has triggered a massive manhunt in Brussels, prompting Belgium to raise its terror alert to the highest level in the capital and the second highest level for the rest of the country. Football fans were told to stay inside the stadium for 2.5 hours before being evacuated, where they chanted Sweden in support of the victims. Belgian authorities haven't said whether more than one person is involved, but a spokesperson for the Federal Prosecutor's Office, Eric van Doos, says the shooting was linked to terrorism.
During the evening, a claim of responsibility was posted on social media, having been recorded by a person claiming to be the assailant. This person claims to be inspired by Islamic State. The Swedish nationality of the victims was put forward as the probable motive for the act.
The attack comes at a time of heightened security concerns in Europe due to the Israel-Gaza conflict, and just days after a teacher was fatally stabbed in northern France. Belgium is also no stranger to terrorist incidents. In 2022, a Belgian police officer was stabbed to death, and in 2016, Brussels became the target of Islamist attacks when 32 people were killed in a suicide bombing at the airport.
Back here, some of your feedback on whether Chris Hipkins should stay as leader of the Labour Party. Frank from Upper Hutt says we need Chris Hipkins staying on as an MP and leader. The left needs stability and not the merry-go-round of leaders that the Nats had recently in Labour before them. This one too, Chippy still in the saddle will hold Luxon to account at every corner and expose his weaknesses. No hiding anymore. This is going to be exciting, says another listener. On Christchurch and a potentially weighty rise in rates, Nikki's got in touch to say, so Christchurch keeps building dinosaur stadiums for 3 to 6 events a year. This mayor has been in council for over a year. Look at council projects, stick to infrastructure and stop spending on the nice to haves. And to Japan now, where an airline has had to put an extra flight on to handle a group of professional sumo wrestlers. There was concern in Japan Airlines that the planes were at risk of exceeding their weight limits. The BBC's Iona Hampton reports.
On average, sumo wrestlers weigh about 120 kilograms, almost double the weight of an average person in Japan. So there was concern when staff at Japan Airlines saw a group of 27 professional sumo wrestlers on the passenger list of one of its planes, including some of the country's heaviest men. The main worry was the fuel capacity needed to get the athletes to a sports festival from Tokyo to the southern island of Amami-Oshima via Osaka. As the airport they were flying into was very small, the airline said it had to take the extremely unusual step of putting on an extra plane to ease the load. Unlike other sports like wrestling and boxing, there are no weight divisions for sumo wrestling. The heavier you are, the more force an opponent has to exert to get you moving and push you out of the ring. The heaviest sumo wrestler of all time was Russian-born Aurora, who retired in 2018. At his peak, he weighed over 292 kilograms.
That's us for the evening, but do tune in tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up, talks to Green Party co-leader Marama Davidson about having their highest election result in decades. Do get up for that one, 5 a.m. We'll catch you a little later in the day. Thanks for tuning in.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Tēnā tātou. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. Chris Hipkins says he'll stay on as Labour MP for Rimutaka for the whole parliamentary term, but the Caucus will decide if he remains leader after Saturday's election loss to National. Mr Hipkins says he'll run a caretaker government in close consultation with incoming Prime Minister Chris Luxon, who's preparing to enter into negotiations with ACT and New Zealand First to form a majority government. President Biden will travel to Israel tomorrow in a show of his support for the country in its war with Hamas. The US president will be briefed on Israel's war aims and strategy, as well as how it will seek to minimise civilian casualties. Police investigating the death of a woman in her 60s in the Wellington suburb of Miramar say they're following positive leads. The woman was found dead in her Totara Road home yesterday by a friend who was concerned for her safety. Police say there is no risk to the public. And out-of-control fires have claimed the life of a 56-year-old man in New South Wales. Firefighters are battling 3 fires in the state's mid-north coast area. The man is thought to have died battling to save his rural property. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Pacific Waves.
Bringing Kiribati back into the forum.
Diving into the big stories of the region.
They are an instrument of the Constitution of Fiji.
And shining a light on issues affecting Pacific peoples in Aotearoa and around the world.
Being able to go out into different places and areas that share special connections with our community was really special.
We tala noa to Pacific leaders, newsmakers, experts and commentators, and bring you up-to-date coverage from our dedicated RNZ Pacific team and talented correspondents on the ground in the region. Pacific Waves at 8:15 weeknights on RNZ National.
And now it's time for Mata with Mihi Ngārangi Forbes and guests.
Tērā te kōrero rongonui me ana mā pango mā whero ka oti te mahi. Hoe ko te kōrero a te kōwhiringa pōti e me ana mā kahurangi mā kōwhai hoki e te iwi he whāriki hou e rārangahia nei. Welcome to Mata with me, Mihi Ngārangi Forbes. Brought to you by Te Māngai Pāho and the Public Interest Journalism Fund. Tonight we survey the new political landscape with commentators Tau Henare and Morgan Godfrey and get reaction from across the political divide. Aotearoa has a new centre-right/far-right government in waiting, and the most powerful government in the history of MMP has been crushed in the shifting tectonic plates of voter preference. Gentlemen, what are we looking at here? Political hellscape or utopia, Tau?
Oh, same old, same old. You know, the last 20 years of politics, in my opinion, has been management, is managerial capitalism. They just manage, and there's nothing transformational, nothing new. So I'm not expecting any transformational in the coming 3 years. It'll same old, same old.
Kapai and Morgan?
I think it was a wipeout, but it wasn't a wipeout for the left, it was a wipeout for the Labour Party. So Labour lost votes to National, they lost votes to the Greens, and they lost votes to Te Pāti Māori. So they have to figure out what they're doing wrong in the centre, what they're doing wrong on the right, and what they're doing wrong on the left too.
One party that did well, Te Pāti Māori, has managed to fight its way back from the political wilderness of 2017 to take 4 of the 7 Māori electorates, while 2 more sit on a knife's edge as the specials are counted. In doing so, Te Pāti Māori has extinguished 2 political institutions, the Te Rekatenes in Te Taitonga and Nanaia Mahuta in Hauraki Waikato, whilst ushering in a new generation of Māori leadership. To discuss, we're joined now via Zoom by Te Pāti Māori's John Tamihere. Tēnā koe.
Yeah, kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. 4 seats and 2.6% of the party vote. Is this what was expected?
Yeah, look, we were very intentional from the get-go. We don't have the resources or the money. So on a cost efficiency basis and the efficacy, we are the most productive and successful party on the stage at the moment in regard to just straight investment. So if you look at us, we took all our campaigning onto social media and on digital boards. That played out well for us. We've got one of the largest Instagram political accounts, followers, TikTok, and of course for the older groups, Facebook. So And that's where a lot of our playouts went. We were intentionally after our younger vote. 70% of our people are under 40, 25% are under 50. And so we're building an intergenerational movement in terms of support and capacity. And Hannah and Doc are the face of that new era coming.
And you may not be finished yet, 500,000 special votes to come. Do you have your fingers and your toes crossed for Tamaki Makaurau and Te Tai Tokiro? I think just 400 votes in each.
Yeah, look, both of those are still in play. And with respect, no one knows where those special votes are going to break. But what I'm quite upset about is that a lot of our people get sent to special queues and just feel like they're second-class citizens lining up to vote, while others, different colour, just get tracked through and get better resourced. So we've got to do something about that in the next election.
And what are your suggestions? I saw Rawiri Waititi calling for a Māori electoral commissioner.
Well, hey, if the mainstream system fails us, we stand up our own, and it won't. And it happened in Kohanga, Kura, Whare Kura, Wānanga. So if whānau ora, if mainstream fails us, we just want. I don't want Pākehā money, I just want our own resources self-managed and rather than embedded in their welfareism. So that's what Rawiri says is our go-to solution.
You've got 4, you're looking at a possible, potentially 2 more. That's a pretty serious number, 6 seats in there. Te Pāti Māori will be sitting across from the coalition, potentially who might be running a referendum on the treaty, introducing a gang prison, reforming the education system. What's your strategy?
Oh, look, activism, as To will tell you, was led out of urban Māori communities. And you can rest assured that Māori population won't lay down and watch 30 years of incremental adjustment, which could have been carried out by way of a revolution, washed away, as happened with The Voice in Australia. The tyranny of the majority just cannot be perverted by a small group called ACT.
Have you heard from the National Party, or has anyone in your team?
Well, we're in Te Pāti Māori, and no one swipes right for us, apparently. I don't know what that means, but younger people would. So getting a date on the other side of the town is very difficult.
When you consider, you've done so well in those 4 seats and 2 still to come, but when you look at Ikoro Rāwhiti, it's Win Te Kushla, Te Ngaire Manual. Was it a mistake to switch out Mecca for Heather Te Skipworth?
Oh, absolutely not. We started our campaign off the back of her crossing the floor to us. We got 5 weeks of cover-to-cover media. Even in the polls, which poll Pākehā preferences, not Māori, we went up to 7%, and in 2 months in a row, we're kingmaker. So she had the courage to do the honourable thing, did it. She paid the price for that. Those Ngāti pros have got something to offer, and they're pretty well organised, the dirty rats, but that's my cousins. So we wish her well, though, Kush. Look, our candidates across the board are very capable in all parties. Nanaia and Reno are very, very good people. They're just in the wrong party at the wrong time.
You got any thoughts for Nanaia or Reno, who've held those seats for a very, very long time?
Those are the 2 first settlement tribes and have been out the gate for 30 years ahead of most other tribes. I would anticipate the iwi leadership would look after them and should look after them, and if they don't, shame on them.
Tēnā koe, John. We'll be in touch and talk over the next few weeks. Kia ora. That's a very good point, isn't it? Nanaia and Reno both come from the first treaty settlements in 1995. Do you think they'll be well looked after?
Like John says, they better, because, it's tough putting yourself in front of the cameras, in front of the party. Doesn't matter whether it's National or Labour. And when you've got the weight of history behind you, and the weight of history is knocking on the back of your head going, don't screw it up, give us something. Mihi atu ki a Nanaia, me Reno. But don't forget, it's not the first time that the Tirikātane family has lost a seat, because in 96,
that's right,
Tūtakawa beat Whetū. So, you know, that stuff happens in politics, and we shouldn't be too fragile about it. Let's move on, let's look. Always keep your eye on the future.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what's going on in the past.
What did you make of John Tamihiri's kōrero there? Do you think they're placed well for those other 2 seats, or...?
I was looking at the numbers the other day, and Te Pāti Māori do 6 times better on the specials than they do on the day. So whether that's enough to close 500 votes...
Do you think this election it's going to be the same, though? Because I can hear ACT talking about how they're going to get extra specials, and the Nationals talking up, you know...
Oh, yeah, they're just blowing smoke. They're blowing smoke.
Everyone's special.
We saw on the day the people who were casting special votes were Māori people, because they weren't on the printed rolls that day. The system had crashed. So essentially, you know, if you're a Māori person who's, say, renting, if you're out of your electorate, if you're enrolled at Nana or Koro's house somewhere way down the other side of the country, well, you're in that hour-long line to cast a special vote. So I think actually we'll probably see maybe this election Te Pāti Māori is going to do better than they did in the past. Whether that's enough to close 500 votes, though, I mean, I reckon there'll be dozens of votes between it either side, whether it's Pini on one side or whether it's Te Pāti Māori on the other side. And
will it push up their party vote enough to not create an overhang, or are you...
Oh, hopefully not. Hopefully not. The best possible scenario for Te Pāti Māori is that they have an overhang, so that they win more electorate seats than they are entitled to on the party vote, because that means they're more powerful. Because National is then deprived of 1 seat, so they have to go to Winston, and then Winston can drive a harder bargain, because he can say, well, you know, it's looking dicey for you fellas.
Is that a good thing, Tau?
No, not
really. Handing
No.
leverage to Winston?
Well, the thing is, you've got a by-election on the 24th of November that'll guarantee National an extra seat.
Still, that's only 62.
Yeah, but we don't, you know, like Morgan says, I mean, 400, when you're 400 and 500 in front, it seems minor, but it's actually not. Because let's not forget, you've got a bit of momentum, even though it's small, very minute momentum, it's still 500. You only have to win by 1.
What do you make of Hana Rafiti Maipi Clark unseating Nanaia, and then, you know, Taku Tawhiris down in Te Taitonga? John Tamihiri says, you know, this is the new Pāti Māori, is it?
You know, on the result, when I was watching it, and I had to explain to my kids and to my mokos what a boil-over was. And the win against Nanaia by Hana was a boil-over. I didn't think that it was going to be possible. So big ups to the Maipi whānau, and they will be a cock-a-hoop and well-deserved.
Well, one of the night's big winners is the Green Party, who picked up 3 seats, including Wellington Central, which was won by Ngāti Awa descendant Tamantha Paul. I spoke to co-leader Marama Davidson and asked her if selecting rangatahi candidates was a deliberate decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly with our Māori and Pacific caucus, I must say, which we've now more than doubled. So welcoming Tamatha, Darlene, Puhana and Efesel, all super staunch, kaupapa-driven, community-led people. And that is absolutely, we know that we need to reach out into communities that maybe haven't traditionally supported the Greens or seen themselves in the Greens. But you have a look at our whole list that's coming in. I think with the 6 new MPs that we are welcoming in, mainly Brown, mainly Māori and Pacific. We've got Lan, who is Vietnamese, whakapapa as well. And then we've got Stephen Scott. So I'm really, really proud that we are purposefully wanting to broaden our presence.
Yeah, I also asked Marama if she plans on sticking around for the long haul.
Yeah, I am. And particularly because I think in some ways I just started feeling like maybe I'd found my stride a little bit. And I think a lot of that was to do with I've had some of the most heinous experiences in the past 3 years, and especially in this year. The level of target and toxicity that has been thrown at me, I've never experienced before. And I think in a way, that actually made me double down even more. After I got over the mumai of it, I think I just decided, oh, well, nothing to lose now. They already hate me, so might as well just tūtika tūpono. So I can see that I've still got passion and energy to support our collective voice. The minute I don't feel that anymore, I know will be my time to go if I'm not already forced out by other means.
Co-leader of the Green Party, Marama Davidson. Tau, what did you make? How did you think Marama ran the campaign?
Oh, I thought it was really good. I thought it was focused on their vote. You know, they didn't worry about what other people were saying. So, very similar to Te Pāti Māori. And both campaigns were actually run very, very well. You know, a lot of people will think to themselves, pity the Labour Party didn't focus earlier. You know, and they didn't grow their vote enormously, but they did win 3 electorate seats, and that's unheard of. And so big ups to the Greens, big ups to Te Pāti Māori.
Yeah, did it make you feel sad when she talked about how she's never experienced so much abuse in the last 3 years?
No.
Didn't know?
No, it doesn't make me sad. That's rhetoric, as far as I'm concerned. Christ, I've been through it in the 90s, for goodness sake, last century. And people say, oh, that was it was tough. But if you're not tough enough, then you don't deserve to be there.
Kapo, he's a hard man over here. Do the Greens have the opportunity to become the biggest left bloc?
No, probably not. After the specials come in, they'll probably just break that ceiling that they hit in 2014. So they'll be around 11 or 12%, but they haven't ever got higher than that. So with a weak Labour Party, the Greens are always going to do better. But Toe's right, they were on message. When Chippy ruled out a wealth tax, the first thing the Greens did was say, we will bring one in. And so immediately those Labour voters crossed over to the Greens, and we saw their support shoot up. The real challenge for them is what happens if there's a resurgent Labour Party, what happens to that Green vote. So when Jacinda came in, the Green vote crashes because we have a resurgent Labour, and then the same thing happens in reverse. So untethering themselves from each other. If you look at some of those seats,
you know, and people have raised this, like, why don't the Greens and Labour do a deal, and particularly in Mount Albert, you know, and it's still really marginal. Melissa Lee might take that seat, and Helen might not, because of Ricardo's got 5,000 votes in there. But is it fair enough with the performance of the Labour that the Greens didn't do a deal?
Yeah, good on the Greens. Seats? Good on the Greens for standing there. I hate to say it, Helen's from Kawerau as well, but she's a professional loser.
Who isn't?
She's a professional loser. She's lost Auckland Central. She came so close to losing the seat held by Michael Joseph Savage, Helen Clark, Jacinda Ardern. Who could lose that kind of seat? Helen White could come close. So it's that was just good on the Greens for standing, because Labour should have done better, and they know they should have done better too.
The Greens also stood candidates in the Māori seats, and I think Darlene Tana, you know, she took a fair chunk of them too.
Yeah.
Good on them for standing? Or should they have done deals?
Yes and no. I mean, I think if you know you're not going to win, then it's a bad idea. If you seriously think you are going to win, then...
What they did win is that they've grown their party vote in the Māori seats. Why do you think that is?
Oh, I think it's time. There's a hell of a lot more young people now than there ever was. And if you have a look at Te Pāti Māori's strategy, like JT says, it was all focused on the under 50s. You know, and that's as a 63-year-old, I think that's actually great. I think, well done, young people. You know, it's about time somebody, including yourselves, patted yourselves on the back for doing something great.
Ka pai. Well, there's lots of questions about what this new government means for Māori, and last night I spoke to National MP Tama Pōtaka to ask about his priorities.
Well, I think we've been very strong on campaigning around the economy and making sure we restore the economy, also law and order, health and education, and I put in there housing as well. And as we know, the cost of living deeply affects all New Zealanders, but particularly Māori communities, and it's certainly troubling for me the type of economic and financial challenges that many of our whānau and communities have. So in light of where that lands, I think our aspiration and our intention to restore the economy and manage the cost of living better is really focused on all New Zealand does. But for me, I look at how we can do that in a very deliberate way, particularly for Māori communities. And you talked about with me in previous quarter around the trampled port, and disproportionately a lot of Māori are in that space. So making sure that we can curate job and business and other opportunities for Māori, and figuring out how we can boost productivity with Māori agribusiness and Māori businesses is something that I'm pretty enthusiastic about, and hopefully I can contribute to positively, not just in Hamilton West, but throughout the Motu and indeed overseas, actually.
Yeah, we wanted to know what Tama had planned as well, so I also asked Tama if he had a bill he had been thinking about.
Well, I've got a bill I've been thinking about and sort of trying to articulate in my mind, and it's around just giving more development opportunities on Māori freehold land. That's certainly something I'm enthusiastic about. Now, Chris Finlayson and Te Level, Joseph Mooney have all had a go at that, and I bring with it a little bit of a different dimension from the actual activation of development on Māori land with my previous responsibilities with PKW and other Māori organisations, that I've seen that there are some things that have worked well and some things that haven't. And perhaps where we went to many years ago was legislatively and regulatory driven, might sort of more in balance between that and development, and figuring out how can we do that and give a bit of balance. But that's at the big Māori collective end. There's a whole range of communities that in the Māori space that we deal with as Māori. Not just as a parliamentarian, but as governors and as owners and beneficiaries and other things. And I've just seen some things that have gone really, really well, and other things we could just do a little bit better.
There was Tama Pōtaka, Hamilton West MP for National. Sounds like he's going to have a go at Te Ture Whenua.
Sounds like he's going to do something for the minority of Māori. The majority of Māori live in a bloody city, for goodness sake. You know, we're at the coalface of industry, of unemployment, of education, of health, right here in Tāmaki. Not one of these MPs have jumped up and said, this is what we're going to do in Tāmaki, you know, for urban Māori, as a starter, for goodness sake.
Te Level had a go at Te Whenua Māori and it didn't go so well for him. How do you think it's going to work out for Tama? And you've worked with Tama, so you know him. Yeah,
I'd be interested to hear what changes he's talking about. How is he going to manipulate the same old, let's open up Māori land for marginal development? Land. Yeah, I mean, as long as it's not one of those Glasgow leases, and as you well know, so many ministers have come and gone, including myself, that have thought about how do we open up Māori land to development.
We heard him, Tama there, talk about collectives, iwi collectives, and I'm wondering, do you think we'll see the return of the big kind of iwi forum leadership that deals with National at that level?
Probably, just because it's easier for National to go to one body than it is to consult with urban Māori, iwi leaders, people who are disconnected, whoever else. But back to Toe's point, though, I think he's absolutely right. We hear from Tama about Māori landowners and unlocking development, but as someone who's got shares and heaps of trust, our land trusts are doing fine. We've got dairy factories, we've got pine plantations, we've got leases with power stations. We don't need development to be unlocked. Where the worst poverty is occurring is within urban Māori communities who don't have those things, who are ignored by government and even by Māori leadership as well, which always looks internally rather than looking outside. So
you're kind of saying that actually leave Māori business alone, it's doing fine, and actually look at the social issues that are impacting Māori in those communities. Exactly.
Turn your eyes to Auckland, turn your eyes to Wellington, to Hamilton, to Christchurch, to Dunedin, to those places. Don't look at the Kawetos or the Te Tekos or wherever it might be, because yes, those communities are struggling, but we see in Auckland, especially South Auckland, West Auckland, things are so much worse and may get so much worse.
Tama Pōtaka has been touted as the next Māori Development Minister. Do you think he'll get it? And if he does, how will he deal with potential referendums on Te Tiriti?
No, here's the question. Who else is there?
Te Hipango?
Did you get back in?
she's on a knife's edge.
Well, there you go. Look, it's got to be Tama in my view, because he fits all he ticks all the little boxes.
Is it going to be lonely for him? Lonelier than when you were in there?
Oh no, I mean, you make your own mates, you make your own fun. As I was always told about by my parents and my grandfather and grandmother, go outside and play. And you created your own world. Well, you're in the right space to do that. Just don't screw it up.
Well, people like Tama Pōtaka with his law background, his work in treaty, in whenua, in Māori organisations, will they have much of a say if there is a referendum on te tiriti and those kinds of act policies?
Oh,